Hello, my name is Caroline Frost, and on behalf of the Royal Television Society, I am delighted to be joined today by the stars of Normal People, Daisy Edgar-Jones and Paul Mescal. On its debut in April 2020, Normal People was nothing short of a phenomenon. It broke all records for the iPlayer in its first week, and it has gone on to get something like 62 million views over the year. So the bar is high, young stars. And Daisy Edgar-Jones and Paul Mescal, delighted to have you with us today. Let's start. Can I take you back to life pre-normal people? So Daisy, let's start with you. Until, I guess, is it fair to say, first of all, life changed for you with Normal People?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Okay. And Paul, would you agree with that? I'm
Yes,
assuming it did, but I don't want to put words in your mouth. You would say the same.
for sure. Categorically, yeah.
Okay, so that's a given, right? Lovely. So I'm going to take you back to life pre-normal. What did a life in the normal day look for you, first of all, Daisy, before this great project appeared on your horizon?
Yeah, so before I got my audition for Normal People, I'd been working for about 5 years, I think 4 or 5 years, on and off as an actor, but mostly not working. So was there a fuzzy sound?
Yeah, is it from me or is that fuzzy sound?
Oh, it's
Yeah,
gone.
it might be you, Daisy.
I think it's me. Is there
Oh, it's
any?
gone. It's gone.
It's gone.
Yeah,
It seems to be happening with my Zoom at the minute that it goes all like crackly. But
it's
I'll.
clean now.
Tell
I
you
think.
what, we'll keep going, and if we hear it, we'll just hit pause, and then we'll wait for it to calm down. It's like, I'm sure you do this in filming, like it's like reversing lorry sounds, and everyone just has to stop.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll start from that scratch. So, Daisy, if we could start with you, what did life in a normal day look like for you in the time leading up to Normal People? What were you up to?
Yeah, so at the time leading up to my audition for Normal People, I'd been working kind of on off since I was 17, mostly doing very, very small parts in things. So I had a small part in a show called Cold Feet. I did sort of every year for a couple of months in Manchester, which I loved, which was my kind of training really. I learned so much from working on that. And yeah, I was working at a cafe. At one point, I was trying to set up a kids acting class in Alexandra Palace. So that was a little project I had. But yeah, it was mostly just auditioning for things and just hoping that something would
Mm-hmm.
land. I was very lucky that normal people came into my life.
Fantastic. And what about you, Paul? Because you were leading quite a different existence before,
Yes.
weren't you?
Yeah, no, I was graduated from drama school for about two 2 years of a normal people first came um into my life. I was working, I graduated and I was working in the theatre.
Mm-hmm.
I did about 2 years in the theatre with various actors and living in Dublin. Wasn't working for about 2 or 3 months before the audition came in and thought that was the end. I was like, had a
Oh,
good run.
oh,
Um,
really?
but I'll start looking for something else. And then it came in and here we are.
Here
Yeah.
we are. Okay. And how did Normal People come your way? What was the first inkling that you had of it? We'll stay with you, Paul.
Yeah, it came through from my agent, kind
Mm-hmm.
of relatively standardly in terms of Lara like just got an email from Louise being like, would Paul like to audition? And then that process started, and in hindsight, it didn't really take that long. It was over the course of about 2 or 3 months. It felt like a long time, kind of knowing how much I wanted to play that part and feeling right
Okay.
for it, but just that desire kind of elongates time, I think.
Mm. And so, why did you want to play the part so strongly? What was it about Connell and the project?
Um, I loved him a lot from kind of my first read of the book. Just like felt like I knew who he was to a certain extent. And the bits that I didn't feel like I knew as well, I found myself incredibly curious about what that was and what was motivating him. Um, but yeah, I just felt a real attachment to him, and I felt like I understood who he was and what motivated him. And with that comes you already kind of see yourself in the scenes when you're reading the sides, which isn't a particularly healthy way to go about it, but it's just kind of the way that I feel like a lot of actors' brains work when they're um, approaching a character.
You just can't help yourself.
Yeah.
Start spotting things. Did you feel like you knew people from your own life in Ireland, similar to Connell? Had you grown up with young men like that?
Or in both Connell and Marianne, I feel like that's why in that.
Oh, are you
Oh, sorry.
freezing? You're freezing. I don't know. Daisy, should
My
we go to
Zoom
you?
froze for a second.
Yeah.
I should be back
We'll
now.
take turns. We'll go to Daisy.
Am I back?
So much stuff on Zoom. You'd think we'd be really good at it.
Oh,
I'm still so bad. I mean, I'm definitely making a fuzzy sound.
this
from
is
here.
like, yeah, it's like, this is like, the nursery rhyme where somebody's vision is missing. One person's vision is dodgy and one person's sound is dodgy. Well, it's all come out in the edit. We'll just be very patient. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Talking because I think that will help with the fuzzy sound.
Okay. Over to you, Daisy. How did normal people come your way?
So yeah, I similar to Paul, I kind of had a real period where I got quite a lot of rejection audition wise, and so I was really like, whoa, I think, yeah, have I made the right choice doing this? And then I got a job on a show called War of the Worlds, which I was very lucky about. So I was filming that at the time, and it was a very very different show, very kind of visual, very sort of sci-fi and things. And so then this audition, I heard about it because I had a couple of friends who had auditioned for it. In fact, one of them had filmed it with yeah, in my room. So I knew, like, had done a self-tape in my flat, so I knew of it, and I remember hearing it and thinking, oh, that sounds really good, and it's Irish, and my family's Irish, and I was like hoping it would come my way, but it didn't. And then about a month or two into filming, I got my self-tape through, and I was like, oh, that's the thing. So I hadn't read the book at that point, but I really remember reading the sides and loving them, and the very different kind of style of acting to when I was doing it at the time, because it was very very internal and not much was said. And I remember thinking how beautiful the sides were. Um, then after I sent that self tape off, I got the book and I read it, and I was like, oh my goodness, I really am glad I didn't know how special this was when I was auditioning for it, because I, yeah, would have probably like just overthought it. So then yeah, I read the book and then I got my recall with Paul. Very nervous, very glad when I got it.
Which leads us to your chemistry read, right? So both of you could have been fine separately, but as we know, the story is all about the potency, the chemical reactions that they set off in each other, these two characters. What was it like? What was your first impression of Paul? We'll start with you, Daisy.
So well, it's so strange, isn't it? Because when, like Paul said, when you're reading that book, you feel so invested in those characters, and you feel so kind of like you really they are so real. Like, I remember whenever I was reading it, every time I kind of put the book down, because I was also filming a very different show, so I was reading it on set, which was probably quite naughty, but anyway, every time I put the book down, it felt like I was leaving my actual life, which was in the pages, and I had to get back to the characters. That's how kind of just 3D they are. And so yeah, when I then flew to Ireland and I met Paul, who was playing Connor, I kind of had this real feeling when I first saw him of like, oh, I think I feel like I've known this person a long time. It's very strange, even though obviously Paul isn't Connell, they're two different people. It was like, oh, that's Connell. And I just remember, I was very very nervous and very dry mouth, and was like just trying not to be too flustered. And Paul was very kind, and he kind of had a little chat with me before I went into my audition just to say hello, and thinking so lovely. And then yeah, and then we got into the room, and it was the first time really I've been in an audition scenario where I haven't been just in my head the entire time. It felt like, I think that's down to first of all Lenny, and the kind of audition scenario he creates is a very collaborative sort of workshoppy one, but also just that, like, it flowed. It felt so easy, when we got into doing the scenes. And I also liked that Lenny was like, we got straight into the scene. Sometimes, you're chatting as yourself a bit, and you're just trying to like not show yourself to be too nervous. So it was nice that we went straight into playing Marion and Connell and just felt very safe and comfortable.
And did Lenny impose quite a testing scene on you from the off in that sense? Did you have to go kind of quite DEFCON 2, you know, real proper, right, we're not going to start with just introduction in school hall, this is going to be about the pair of them? Was it pretty much full throttle?
We had quite a few. I think one of them, one of them was the scene. I can't remember all of them. I think one of them was one of them was the Ghost Estate scene where Ghost Estate scene. When they go to the Ghost Estate, and that's a real kind of tense moment between them when you know Marion's kind of confronting the way Connell's treating her. So I remember that, and then we also did the first time they see each other in Trinity scene, which is a big old long scene. And then I think we did the scene where it was very different to what ended up being in the show, but the scene where Marianne says to Connell he should study English at Trinity. I think we did that.
Yeah, those three.
Wow, yeah, pretty full on. So over to you, Paul. What were your first impressions? I mean, it's a bit like putting two pandas in a cage together in a zoo and then hoping that magic happens, right? Did you feel under a lot of pressure?
No, I did, like, again, I feel like I don't know if our description of it can do it justice, and it's not remotely to make it sound underwhelming, but I found myself feeling incredibly calm with Daisy and in those characters. So it was kind of, I imagine, the opposite of what people imagine a chemistry read is. And I can't really fully describe it either. It was just this kind of thing of like, oh, that person, Daisy, feels like Marianne to me. And it felt like when I was working the scene with her, I felt like I found it just way easier to act with her and for Connell to kind of come to the surface a little bit more, and because the auditions are just such awful experiences, full stop, I find. So like to be in an audition and feel comfortable is not a feeling I'm familiar with, and it's that feeling is very much, I felt calm when I was working with Daisy, and it was really exciting, and you really felt the script come off the page. So yeah, and I suppose that's probably what the chemistry read is for. It's not like, oh, do these people have this thing? Because of course, like at that point, we didn't know each other. It was just us coming together as actors and going, this is what we think, but without actually communicating, and it just kind of happened in the scenes, which was pretty exciting.
Can you imagine if you hadn't liked each other? And then you'd have had to roll into this project together? Would have been a bit more challenging, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I feel like the show would have been shit.
Yeah, maybe not the 62 million views. Yeah, for sure. Right, so let's get into it. So what did you each think of your characters? So who is Connell to you? You said you had a lot of empathy for him straight from the off. What did you make of him? Did you like him?
I feel like it's so long ago now,
I
but like,
know, I'm sorry, I realize that we're having to take you back.
yeah, which is fun, because he is, I feel like he's a very introverted person who's kind of been thrust into this position in this Incarically where he lives, where he's this popular person, and it feels to me that he doesn't have the tools in which to embrace that role. But it also, by being in that, it kind of takes the pressure off him, and it kind of, there's a comfort in where he lives, and I feel like he leans into that too much and is really quite terrified of stepping away from that. And then he meets Marianne, who at the time I don't think he's aware is going to be probably the most formative relationship he's ever going to have in his life. And he falls madly in love with her and mistreats her. And then he moves to Dublin and has to rediscover himself, and has to rediscover his relationship with Marianne. And both of those things are incredibly difficult. And I feel like he ranges between intense joy and intense suffering over that period of time. And but it's a series that's about growth and mistakes and wonder in being in company with another person who you love. And yeah, that's kind of what I think, albeit like it's a year and a half on since.
Well, he clearly left an impression on you then,
I'm definitely
fair
up
to
to
say.
it.
And Daisy, what would you have to say at this point about Marianne? You've had a bit of time as well to reflect on her. What are her strengths and weaknesses that really leapt out at you?
Yeah, I mean, I love Marianne and I love Connell. Like, I feel like, yeah, I adore those characters, and I think that I very vividly remember when I read the book of really loving the way Sally wrote Marianne's inner life and her thoughts, and how, especially when she was at school, you know, she had these really eloquent thoughts on what it is, you know, what the social ladder at school, and how she feels that, you know, she's sort of a quiet observer of it. She's not even very low down on it. She's just away from it, and she just watches kind of the dynamics at school. And I think, you know, Marianne's a very kind of complex person who has throughout the story a very troubled relationship with her sense of self. She doesn't really believe that she's worthy of love when she very much is. And I think it's through Connell, really. Though obviously there's times where he does mistreat her. I think we see kind of as the story progressed that he really helps her to come into her own, and you know, it's a real coming of age story. And so yeah, by the end, she's at this place where, you know, she's sort of okay, and I think she's not like ecstatically happy, she's just okay with her life and is. But also, yeah, an incredibly intelligent person, um someone who can be quite feisty and mean at times and curt, but also is incredibly soft and kind and empathetic. So I just think she's wonderful.
Yeah, there's a beautiful contentment that emanates off her, I think, by the end, which is incredibly reassuring for viewers having gone through the roller coaster. Um, Lots of actors will be watching this. Technical question: how do you prepare for such a role, apart from obviously reading every page of the book over and over again? For example, your accent that has earned great plaudits from the natives of Sligo. So how did you crack it?
Yeah, I think like it's the accent was something I am so relieved that was okay, because, you know, I think and actually was also relieved that I had to do, because I think it really allowed me to have a very clear differentiation between Marianne and me, because I think, you know, her tone of voice and the kind of softness that I put into it and chose to use within that accent kind of very much informed a lot of the time delivery of lines and scenes and things like that. So I love that challenge. But no, for me, the way I work with accents is I have to listen and listen and listen. I can kind of tune into it because it's like it's like a piece of music. But I was also lucky that I had an Irish sound in my house always, because I lived with my mum, and my granddad lived with us, sorry, for a long time too, and so I always had that. But then in terms of preparation, I think, you know, of course, there's I read that book so many times, and I would kind of get the scripts and I would copy and paste lines from chapters that I felt helped to motivate, and that was such a joy when you were coming to scenes, because you sort of knew what you were thinking as you were saying lines. And I really realized through doing Normal People and other jobs since that I think I'm quite a logical actor. I find it very hard to say something if I don't quite know why I'm saying it, you know, what's motivating that. And so that was amazing to have all of your brain and your logic in a book to reference whenever you weren't quite sure. But I think there's only so much prep that you can really do, because so much is found on the day, because you have an idea of your you know, of your reading of a scene, but it's so then changed by the other actors you're performing with. And so a lot of it was, you know, you do as much prep as you can, but then on the day when you're reading those lines out loud in blocking, suddenly you're like, oh, this is what this scene is, and oh my gosh, like that's quite a funny moment, I didn't even realize, you know, and things like that. So so much of it really is just feeling it on the day when you're with that actor in that scene.
And that actor often was Mr. Mescal. Where did you go for your prep? I mean, a little bit closer to home for you to start with.
Yeah, for sure. But look, I find that question kind of scary because I don't really.
Tell the
in
truth.
like,
Nothing.
there
You did
was
nothing.
any of it. Like I don't like, for example, I don't have like a fixed means of prep for each role or anything like that. And I feel like, to reiterate what Daisy was saying, in terms of we had an incredible reference for what was happening for those characters, and I felt like a lot of the work was kind of transcribing a lot of those internal monologues that I knew we weren't going to have in a visual setting of the series, and trying to internalize them or outwardly project those things in a subtle manner. And you can't practice that. You just try and think about it a lot, and then they call action, and you hope to God that something is readable to an audience but still feels private and subtle. I don't know. I feel like in preparation for that, I just spent a huge amount of time thinking about Connell and what motivates his decisions and actions, and how he vocalize, like how he, because he spends, like, I remember talking to Sally about it, and she was like, "Yeah, Connell was hard to write in places because he doesn't even say anything." So it was about trying to find little kind of grunts or non-vocal, um like, I don't know, like non-vocal releases that kind of intimate something that's happening inside him. So yeah, but a lot of it I'm not really sure of, and I don't know. I feel like that's probably something that has stayed with me going from job to job, is that I don't like to overthink it, because then when you go to shoot something, and I don't know, this could totally change the more or less I work, but I feel like the more you overthink it, the more you want to deliver on that piece of preparation, and you kind of close off to the opportunity of like being available to wonderful actors like Daisy and directors like Lenny and Hetty and
Mhm.
that. So yeah.
Did you find it intense to film with all of that, trying to get out, live your own way and not overthinking, and then realizing that you're thinking about not overthinking? Or were there times when you could just relax and kick back and go with the flow? Or how did it feel filming all of this?
I think it happened so quickly, Daisy, didn't it? Like, it was just like the schedule was packed, and we were kind of running around the place, and the atmosphere on set was always so lovely. But we didn't really exactly that. I feel like it catered towards that. Like, you don't really have time to think, and that's not to say that we rushed it, but just the nature of schedules for television. But then there is moments, like, say, for those big two-hander scenes where it does require a little bit of, or it does require like active conversation around like what the focus should be on in terms of what an audience is going to absorb. And that's like, we just did an interview with Lenny, who so wonderfully put that he feels like in a show like Normal People, with characters that Sally wrote, the actor does have a responsibility to kind of have a little bit of themselves with their actor's brain still on, because the shifts in tone are so minute and so detailed. You can't just be in it, whatever that means. You know, it's
Mm-hmm.
got to be some sort of consciousness behind it sometimes. And it was fun kind of navigating that
Yeah,
a little bit.
yeah, real challenge.
Mhm.
Daisy, did you actually enjoy filming? Was it an intense experience? Was it incredibly challenging, or were you able to lean back and enjoy yourself at the same time?
I mean, like, I was saying to Paul earlier, like, I had a real laugh every day, which, you know,
Oh,
you don't
right.
get, and is such a joy. And you know, I think like what was so wonderful about this project is, you know, it really felt like you were working with a group of people who really all equally loved the story as much as each other, and all really wanted to work as a team. Like, it was a very, very collaborative feeling, and it doesn't always feel like that. Sometimes it can be a little bit, you know, when lots of different ideas and things like that, people can, but it really felt like we were all just in synergy and wanting to elevate each other. And so, yeah, I mean, of course, like, you know, it was my first sort of bigger part, and so there were times where I was slightly nervous and in my own head, and had to try and remove that inner voice who was doubting myself, you know, and that can be tricky. But I think because of how supported and safe we felt everyone behind the camera was, felt far, and how supported I felt in front of the camera by working with Paul. Even though we were doing scenes that required us to be very vulnerable, I didn't feel that way because I felt that I had people who cared about me, looking after me every step.
So now the jury's out. My friends and I had a wonderful discussion about this when it came out. So I'm really glad that I can put you both on the spot. You can give us the definitive answer. Which character out of the two of them has the more power? Or is that the whole point, that it evolves and swings betwixt? So Daisy's really thinking. I'm going to ask Paul because Daisy's really busy thinking. Paul, what would you say to that?
No, I definitely think that I don't know. It's kind of a trick question because to me, those characters' lives don't end at the end of the series. It's like I feel like they'll constantly be dancing between being in a position of power in the relationship. I definitely feel like at the start, Connell has the power in terms of like he dictates what their relationship is going to look like, but that changes like that the minute they go to Trinity. And I don't know if you agree, Daisy, but I feel like at the end of it, Marianne's kind of in power in the sense that she sees that Connell needs her to make the decision for him to a certain extent. Like there's much more, there's obviously lots of other things at play, but there's a kind of him, there's an energy in it, I feel, of him kind of giving himself up to her a little bit to go like, can you tell me to go to New York, even though I want you to come with me? But there's a power in that I think Marianne wields and Daisy performs with such grace and subtlety, which is quite thrilling.
Pretty good answer. Okay, Daisy, over to you. What are your thoughts?
I think that, I mean, there's so many different like examples of power, and so like the theme of power is such a large one because there's power, there's emotional power, then there's like obviously within their kind of more intimate relationship, there's the power dynamics at play there. But I think that's why the story is so truthful and why it's also so infuriating when you watch it, because just like in real relationships, that power dynamic shifts all the time. Not necessarily because of, and usually more rather than less, it's because of the two different individuals' view of the power they have, if that makes any sense. So a lot of the time they kind of miss each other or combat each other because they kind of they don't know where the power is and who has it and whatnot. It's kind of ever changing. And so I think Paul put it so beautifully, like by the end, Marianne kind of, she does kind of I guess gift in a sense power to Connell to be okay on his own, and for her to be okay on her own, and for them to have a relationship with one another without it having to be a part of that, of power not having to, they are just equals and there's a balance there.
They give it up. Yeah, for sure.
They're giving up that kind of need to control or need to, which I think when you're young, there's that the insecurities or whatever that's at play, or life experience and things like that. Yeah, there is that kind of battle between you of who's sort of likes who more and who I don't know. But I think by the end you sort of grow up a little bit, and so this idea of power and things is kind of balanced.
I think you're describing the difference between ego and love.
Yes, yeah, and how you can love, and also how love can be so much more simple when you love yourself. Both those characters have a very difficult relationship with who they are, which I think is just very natural to being early 20s and maybe just your whole life. But I think that by the end we see that they're kind of content with who they are, and so they can be happy together and apart.
Do you think it would have survived the separation if we'd had a few more minutes, another episode? Do you think we would have seen a sweet reunion in somewhere in Broadway in New York or something? Or do you think we're just The sweetnesses we don't need to know, right?
I think that's it really, because I think that, you know, the not knowing means that they still exist somewhere, and that they are living life. And I don't know whether that is together, or I think they'll always be in each other's lives, but I don't know in what sense, and whether that time needs to pass. So yeah.
Paul, I'll ask each of you, but I'll start with you. What was the most moving scene for you to film? There were so many, I realized that. And
But I feel like for me personally, um, either the scene in episode 10, but I'll probably more so the final scene, just because of the context in which we shot it. Um, because it was a pickup, and like we'd gotten past the kind of frenzy of having shot, like principal photography had finished, and we had kind of a little break away from the characters, and we knew that we were coming back. It was all kind of a little bit meta in terms of like, it felt at that moment that Connell and Marianne were saying goodbye to each other, and me and Daisy were saying goodbye to the characters, and it was all just a bit like emotional and upsetting, and but also not in a kind of heavy way, this kind of like weird, nostalgic, happy sadness, but quite traumatic. Yeah, so I'd say that is up there. But it's like, look, I feel like the series is littered with emotionally challenging scenes, and
what happened in episode 10 that struck you so strongly?
just this the conversation he has with the guidance counselor, and kind of his relationship to himself,
Mm-hmm.
kind of see at that point, like, I, having shot for so long, I was like, I love this guy, and like just that suffering felt very palpable to me in the writing.
Yeah.
Just kind of wanted to deliver in some shape, way, or form, and that was quite difficult. Just because I also knew that from an audience's perspective, it was important that I gave them the opportunity to see into what motivated him to make some of those mistakes, was his kind of massively interior and kind of complex brain. That was kind of our one opportunity at seeing the way his brain, like the cogs of his brain, actually work. And that was quite upsetting, because he articulates things that I think are really just sad.
Yeah, for sure. But it was beautifully done. So you paid him tribute, right? You,
Great.
um, Daisy, what for you was the most moving scene to film?
Um, I have to definitely agree. I mean, with Paul, I mean, like personally, I think one of the most moving things is definitely the final scene, because, like Paul said, you know, saying goodbye to a really formative, wonderful time of our lives, you know, filming that, and people involved and those characters. And it was also saying goodbye to them being ours. Suddenly it's like, you know, after that, they aren't ours anymore, they're everyone's, which is wonderful. And whether they're going to like it or not was obviously we didn't know at the time. But I also think, thinking about it, I think one of the most kind of moving episodes is episode 11. There's this scene that they have, when they're eating ice creams and the ice lollies on the bed, and it kind of, they sort of start to speak, and they haven't really been together for a while, but it's the first time they're both not in relationships, and they kind of get onto this conversation that, takes them to a really intense place. And then Marion asks something of Connell and he can't give it to her, and she sort of storms out leaving, and there's this whole scene with her brother, and there's one shot of them driving, at the end of it, and he, you know, he loves her. And I think for me, first of all, I love David Byrne, and that's the song that's playing at the end. So I wonder if how much is to do with that. But I just think that whole scene is so moving, because it's just so simple. Just, you know, just because I love you and I'm never going to let anyone hurt you. And they just drive off, and it's just like, breathe. And I think that's one of my favorite episodes. So that would be probably the final scene, and then that episode.
And what was the time gap between finishing filming and then having it air for say in the UK?
So we finished principal photography, I think, in October 2019.
Okay.
We did a few pickups in, I think, like November, December, and then we did our final week of pickups early March, literally a week or so before lockdown was announced. Then we had about a month, I think, at home, both of us probably going, oh my God, it's going to come out, where are they going to do?
Yeah.
And then it was really April was when it came out. It was just after they announced another 3-week lockdown, I remember. So yeah, so it was a kind of pretty that whole time.
Let me flick to Paul, let your sound calm down again. So Paul, you had, so 5 months between end of principal photography and then, as Daisy said, just a little sweet spot of quiet.
Yeah.
And then April 26th, bang.
Oh, hell breaks loose. Yeah.
So yes, well, there we go. I've said the records. I mean, it was a record-breaking week in many senses, but how did it feel for you, particularly watching that just go so phenomenal overnight?
I felt like incredibly surprised, not in like surprised at the show being received so well, but kind of a surprise at the kind of volume of people that were watching it so quickly. I was like, what, this is like, it felt quite overwhelming. And then I just felt a great sense of pride because it feels to me like that show is a show that was just made the right way, not just like creatively, but like it was a show made with like great spirit and the people behind, like I said it earlier, I think that it's like good shows and kind of shows that are kind of emotionally heavy don't have to be traumatic experiences to film. And I feel like there was just a lot of joy that went into making it, and the product is, from an audience's perspective and what we've been told, is moving, and I felt a great deal of pride watching it. Of course, like that pride kind of establishes itself after the initial panic of like, oh, are people gonna like it? Holy shit! What's happening? Um,
What was the first moment that you realized, oh, this has found an audience?
I think it was like the first, literally, that weekend of just seeing kind of social media go a little bit nuts. Um, I don't like that's just kind of a reference point for us now in today's society. It's like, what are people saying about it?
Mm.
And it, like, critically it did well, and it all like it's I'm definitely like missing big, like there's definitely like blind spots in my memory just because there was so much happening. But that's kind of, I remember the first weekend just seeing Twitter go a little bit wild and being like, oh, it's working.
It's a bit bonkers though, isn't it? Because as you say, it was all kicking off on social media, but effectively overnight, you went from somebody who could walk down the street being recognized, not being recognized, go back to your business, to somebody who many people would instantly recognize. And on the other hand, as Daisy said, you're in lockdown. There's no one to pap you, right? So it must have been a very strange experience to become an overnight sensation when there was nobody there to harass you. Were you a bit disappointed or a bit relieved?
Oh,
They came.
Oh, they came. I sorry.
don't think
Yes,
again.
I'm sure it's all relative.
But I also don't think me and Daisy have a reference point for anything other than what happened that summer, and that's wild enough for me for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Daisy,
I
what about you? When did you first feel that, wow, okay, this has found so many more people than even you could have dreamt of?
it, it was strange because I the night before it came out, I knew it was airing at like 6:30 in the morning, and I remember waking up to a lot of messages and from friends and friends of friends and people I hadn't seen in years, and it was like only had been an hour since the show had come out, and I was like, that's not happened ever before to me. That's strange. And then I went and I watched the series with my flatmates, and then yeah, suddenly like messages kept coming, and people kept sort of messaging and wanting to talk about the show, not just saying like well done, but also wanting to like talk about the detail of
Mm.
like how wellness scene or that song or the camera angle, and oh my goodness, this, you know, wow. And then obviously, you know, it was such an like incredibly surreal time. I mean, we were like in our houses, you know, we had no real everything was just digital. Everything was like was untangible, and so it was this idea of something of like people are watching this show, it's getting big. What does this mean? But it was not connected to anything real, because at the same time you were still just like had your one daily walk and you got to the shop to get your orange juice. Do you know what I mean? So it was very. And then as the weeks went on, you know, suddenly then yeah, we obviously we were in the, it was in the papers and it was breaking records and critics were being kind about it, which was nice. And also Paul and I we started doing all these interviews, and again this has all been digital, you know, it's
Yeah.
still it's been like a crazy year, and like Paul and I haven't even been able to really see each other in person, and yet that whole experience of filming it was so, you know, it was like
Yeah, weird.
shared with us and also the crew and Lenny, and we haven't seen Lenny since, I mean, March last year. And so yeah, I think it's like we've said, there's so many blank spots because so much of it was just like this kind of dream world of not quite knowing how much of the strangeness was just the strangeness of everyone's life, and how much of the strangeness was because our show was really popular.
Yeah.
I wish I kept a journal. I think it would have been a really great diary entry. Those like few months. So I wish I'd done
Such
that.
a unique, in terms of timing, what an extraordinary thing for you both to go through, to having this huge recognition. And as you say, it's all kind of existing in this little box, right? You can put your lid down and just go and have your completely normal life.
Yeah,
I don't know, just bizarre.
Yeah.
so there's moments where I'm like, oh, I'm in Vancouver. That I never thought that would happen, but it's like still a bit like, why am I in Vancouver? Like, how's this happen? Like, you know, it's still so odd. Like, it still is. I mean, I think, you know, it's
Why do you think it touched so many people in such a strong, visceral, nostalgic, mournful sometimes, but also joyful? It touched so many different buttons. What do you think it was about that show? Have you been able to assess it as almost a receiver as well?
yeah. I mean, I think about like why it moved me when I read the book, and why it moved me every day on set. You know, sorry, I screamed.
All right, there you go.
Yeah. So I obviously like I'm trying to think because I think that like I think it's down to really that it does not shy away from. It's a series that just is an observation of love, of being a young person, of growing up, of pain, but nothing is ever over explained or over kind of it requires you as an audience, just like when you read the book, to use your experience to empathize with them, because at no point is anything ever over articulated. It's
Yeah.
very in what it feels like to fall in love, and what it feels like to feel heartbreak, and what it feels like to be with someone physically for the first time, and you're here always, you're with them, and so it requires you to fill in everything that's going on. And so I think, yeah, and it's just a story about normal people, and nothing massively exciting or like huge or dramatic happens, and the most kind of the biggest dramatic parts are very domestic settings and very simple moments like a first kiss, but what that actually means for who you become for the rest of your life. And I also think there's probably a part of it did come down to the context of the show coming out, because it was during a time when suddenly we were so aware of the people in our life that weren't filling it every day because we were separated. And I
Mm.
think what the show celebrates is like, and what Sally writes so beautifully in that last chapter is like, rely on people, and people in your life, like they change who you are and they're so important. And yeah, I think during lockdown, obviously we were so aware suddenly of like those people being gone, and I hope after lockdown we're aware of like just how special it is to connect with other people, strangers and people who you've known forever, you know.
Mm. So, I mean, the award season is upon us. I think, Paul, you have an Emmy nomination. Daisy, you have a Golden Globe nomination. Both of you nominated for Critics' Choice Awards. So, as well as all those record-breaking audiences, this is proper critical acclaim. How has life changed professionally for you both since making it and having that kind of reception? Who was gone, Paul?
I think to kind of like second what Daisy said in terms of like being in Toronto, it's like I've pinched myself moments of just like, what am I doing in Australia? What am I doing? Like, it's. I feel like all my answers are so vague because it still kind of feels like that. I feel like it hasn't been happening long enough for me to feel remotely secure in anything that's happening, and also to kind of be. I feel like I'm walking around being like, okay, this is all normal. This is what's supposed to be happening, but yeah, like it's definitely changed the trajectory that I was on prior to it, and
In terms of how does that demonstrate itself? The offers that are coming in, are you being offered roles without auditioning, no self tapes, that kind of thing?
yeah, in certain instances, and in other ones you do, but that's definitely been a first.
Okay, great.
And kind of just having filmmakers and companies want to sit down and talk to you, so you suddenly have to have a very kind of clear idea about what kind of artist you are over a very short period of time. And
Right.
I definitely feel like for me personally, and to be honest, it's like I definitely feel a little bit of like faking it till you make it kind of thing. I'm like, I don't know if you agree, Daisy, but I feel like we're in the very kind of early stages of this part of our careers, and it's incredibly exciting, and I'm hugely grateful for what normal people did as a result.
Just giving you choices,
Yeah,
far more choices than you expected to have, and to think you were on the brink of giving it all up. So, Daisy, what about you? How has life changed professionally for you in this extraordinary year?
Same as Paul, really. And I think I guess it was like, before normal people, like the idea of choosing what you do next was never something. It was just like hoping to goodness something would come. And now I think it's a lot more like exciting to be like, what are the stories I feel are important to tell, and to feel a bit more safe in taking the time to pick those right projects and those right filmmakers that fulfill your creative sort of vision and your creative drive and what you want to say. So that's been something that's been really lovely, to be able to sit and read scripts and really think about why I want to choose to do them if they give me the part. Also, yeah, like you said, at least now when I'm sending a self tape, there's less of a feeling of like this is just going into the ether, which it can often feel like. A bit more of a like, I think someone might see it, which is good.
Do you worry at all that you're being offered just a whole bunch of Mariannes and Connells? Is that something you're consciously looking to try and avoid and sidestep any kind of typecasting?
Yeah, I think you do get some scripts that I guess follow young love and things like that, and so it's whether like they're the right ones and they have something different to say, or and so yes, but like I've been lucky. I've read a lot of very, very different scripts, and it's been really fun also to read more scripts and get an idea of why you like something and are drawn to it, and characters that do spring off the page to you and ones that don't.
And what about you, Paul? Do you feel that you're being offered sort of lovelorn, charming Irish young men?
and maybe not so much. There's definitely sometimes that people go like, "Oh, he did this thing, so he'll want to do it again," and I'm definitely not interested in playing like young romantic characters, but
Yeah.
I am conscious that like Connell was probably the first version of that I ever played, even like from the theater I did. It was all kind of more they were like my casting I felt like was more disconnected than what people may or may not assume. So I'm kind of looking to make choices that hopefully will surprise people in a good way, in terms of like I don't want to go and play Connell 10 times again. I love him deeply, but I want to play characters that scare me a little bit, or are a bit more out of what people may assume. And I think that what goes with that is having, I feel like really privileged with the team of people in terms of agents that I have around me, who aren't pushing that to, in fact, they're pushing me in the opposite direction, that they're, we all have a similar taste, and yeah, it's fun being in this part of
So
it.
you wouldn't play 10 Connells. Would you play Connell again? I mean, if circumstances allowed, if Sally Rooney, the muse struck, there was more to say for these two characters, would you return to for that?
Happily.
Right, there we go. So, and what about you, Daisy? Would you be happy they open another book of Marianne?
100%, yeah.
So just a couple more questions for you both. We've all watched Normal People. That's kept us going during the first lockdown, and probably many, many people have watched it more than once, I imagine. What did each of you find to divert and entertain you on the television in those strange months?
Paul, do you want to go?
So what was the thing you were trying to make me watch?
Um,
Uh,
Sunset.
what was it called? Oh yeah, Selling Sunset. I didn't.
Selling Sunset. You weren't persuaded by Selling
I
Sunset.
wasn't persuaded by Selling Sunset. I tried the first 2 episodes, but it didn't land. What else? I just finished The Office. I'm starting Parks and Recreation. I'm sticking with the kind of lighter stuff, but very, very much enjoying that.
I just watched This Is a Sin,
Mhm.
which is amazing. And then obviously, like the rest of the nation, I've been watching the UK RuPaul, which has been fabulous. And then I May Destroy You and things. I kind of did it. I kind of did like, Queen's Gambit, like all the kind of like
everything you were told to watch, you went and watched, basically.
Yeah.
And Selling Sunset. Final question then. I know that you've both been able to travel a bit, but as we do start to emerge, to poke our little heads out of the tortoise shell of lockdown, what are each of you looking forward to most when reality hopefully comes back to us? What is the thing that you are hankering after doing the most?
For me, it's like live music is the
Right.
thing I'm looking forward to. I love, like, I want to go to a big long festival and just listen to music with a crowd of people. That's what I'm most looking forward to.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Paul?
Like gathering up a group of friends, going to one of our apartments, having like a pre-drinking party, and then going to a gig that we all are excited to go to. That would, that's kind of almost making me sad thinking about that, but exciting. Yeah.
It's the beauty of normal, right?
Yeah, really looking forward to the pre-drinks and then like the kebab on the way home.
Yeah.
All the things we took for granted. Well, I think it's very fitting that you both are full of the beauty and joy of normal stuff, because you brought us both so much joy with this series. And I just want to thank you both for sharing your time and your insights on what is such an enormously beautiful project. So thank you both very much today.
Thank you very much.